So every day when we look at our social media, we're faced with many decisions. Should we like it? Should we share it? Should we comment about it? And those are small decisions. In Congress now, they're trying to figure out the balance between freedom of speech and censorship. What does the Torah have to say about this? So there was no social media when the Jewish people were in the desert, but there's a sensational story in this week's Parsha. It's the reason why the Jewish people spent 40 years in the desert. Moshe sent spies, 12 of them, to spy out the land of Israel before they enter. And they come back. 10 of them are punished and arouse the entire Jewish people against Moses, and on account of that, they spend 40 years in the desert. Now, what happened? They come back and they say this was a beautiful land and beautiful fruit. However, the people are giants and they live in fortified cities. We'll never be able to conquer them. The other two say a very similar story. They say how beautiful the land is, how strong the land is. And they're both saying the similar story. There's no fake news over here going on. However, one group causes the Jewish people to end up in the desert for 40 years, and the other group, actually, one of them was Joshua, who succeeded Moshe Rabbeinu. So the answer is that, and they were commissioned to give a report. It's not like they weren't supposed to speak about the land. The answer is that each one took the narrative to where they wanted to take the story. The 10 spies came back and said, we won't be able to conquer it. Now, Joshua and Kalev said, we will be able to. And then the Jewish people didn't really get any new information when they heard from Joshua and Kalev. So from here you see that it's not so much about the story. Definitely if it's true news, you also have to be careful of what you do with the narrative. On the flip side, not in this week's Parsha, but in Parshas Noach, you have a story of 3 sons of Noach. 3 sons of Noach. Noach comes out of the Teva, out of the ark after the flood. He's had an exhausting experience. He plants a vineyard, makes wine, gets drunk. He's in his tent and he's naked. One son comes in, his name is Ham, and he sees his father naked. He gets excited about the gossip and he tells his 2 brothers, Shem and Yafes, about it. Well, Ham gets cursed for doing that. Shem and Yafes come into the tent. It says they walked in backwards, they didn't see the nakedness of their father, and they covered their father. And they get all sorts of blessings for that. Again, it's a question of narrative. 2 ways to look at every single story. Is this a story where we could do something about it? Like Shem and Yafes, we could cover the nakedness of our father? Or is this just a story to share for gossip or to even be critical about? In the beginning of this week's Parsha, Rashi says the sequence of this story is immediately after another story about another juicy gossip. What's that story? The story is about Moshe's sister Miriam. Moshe's sister Miriam is a great heroine of the Jewish people. She sang at the splitting of the Red Sea. She was the one who encouraged her parents to come back together after Paro had made a decree against against the baby boys being born. She encouraged her parents to get back together, and Moshe was born on account of her. So it's Moshe's older sister. And she finds out from Moshe's wife that Moshe no longer is living with the family. And she tells her brother Aaron about that. And on account of that, she's punished. In other words, if you have a problem with the family life of one brother, don't tell it to the other brother. That's just being critical. If you want to fix something, speak directly to Moshe, and maybe we'll have another Moshe born, just like on account of you, Moshe was born, that your parents came back together, had a Moshe. That would accomplish something. Why do I mention all of this? Because this week is the Rebbe's yard site. And if there's one thing phenomenal about the Rebbe, he taught us to speak positive about everything in this world, think positive, and do positive. Don't be critical about things. He would even say that in Israel, when you have a hospital, they would call it Beit Cholim, a house of sick people. He said, don't call it a house of sick people, call it Beit Refuah, a house of healing. Don't call something a deadline, because that's negative, death. Why would you say that? Call it due date, birth. That's something exciting. Always use the proper words. Change the narrative always to something positive. And always try to think, why did this story come to me? What can I do to change the world to make it better when I hear this story? And if it's about doing something like Shem and Yavuz did, they covered the nakedness of their father, then we'll be able to make the world a better place, a more positive place. And then, of course, the ultimate redemption when everything turns positive.